Heather, it's a real pleasure having you with us, and your book is explosive and powerful and much needed today. I want to jump right into it. Identity politics, racial tension, battles over diversity, they seem to just be wearing us out. Why is it that we are suddenly thrust into all of these issues about identity politics and race?
Well, because this has been simmering on college campuses for the last 4 decades. People haven't been paying closely enough attention, and unfortunately things are now coming to a head. From the moment a student steps on a college campus today, a massive diversity bureaucracy gets its talons into him to convince him that he's either an oppressed class or an oppressor class. And students are being taught to hate each other, to hate the greatest works of Western civilization. And that mentality of victimology, of delusional sense of oppression is following students into the real world, and it is dividing our society into these completely irrelevant categories of race, gender, sexual orientation, when what should matter about an individual is his individual talents, his interests and his passions, not the irrelevancies of gonads and melanin.
I can't help but think that a lot of parents are completely unaware of what's happening to their students when they send them off to college and they're writing these huge checks.
Most don't, but I fear, Governor Huckabee, that even if they did, they wouldn't really care, because college campuses today are the most tolerant environments in human history for society's traditionally marginalized groups, and yet a massive bureaucracy, which is why tuition is so grotesquely expensive, is committed to this idea that campuses are lethally dangerous to students of color and females. So we have today a culture of hysterical narcissism. Again, it has destroyed humanistic learning on college campuses, but it is now destroying civil peace.
I'm a child of the 60s. It was the college campuses that really were pushing the notion of true diversity. What on earth happened since then?
Well, the 60s were not so halcyon a period, Governor Huckabee. In fact, that was the start of the madness, because you had, unfortunately, the civil rights movement quickly morphed into Black Power. You had demands for Black Studies programs based on nothing other than skin color, again, of the student body and the professoriate. And eventually you got feminists joining the victim train. The most extraordinary thing that people have been resistant to accepting that's been happening in the last decade or two, Governor Huckabee, is the incursion of racial and gender identity politics into science fields. Every science department in the country now is under enormous pressure from the federal government and from a school's own diversity enforcers to hire by gender and race as opposed to merit. A cancer researcher at an Ivy League medical school was berated by his supervisor for giving a pharmacology exam that was too, quote, fact-based. Well, I don't know about you, but if I've got cancer, I want my doctor to know the facts of drug interactions.
Heather, I've got less than a minute, but I've got to ask you, if I'm a parent of a college kid, what do I do?
I would urge parents, observe what your student is learning. Try to help him choose courses that at least have a reading list that will expose them to eloquence and to beauty, to tragedy, to humor, to wit, to irony. Don't assume that your student is capable of choosing the greatest works, and don't assume that the faculty are living up to their basic intellectual responsibility of leading students to wisdom. They are not. It's on your shoulders. And I would also put in a word to alumni. Please do not send another cent to your alma mater unless you have done due diligence and have persuaded yourself that your school is still committed to passing on the inheritance of Western civilization.
Outstanding advice from an outstanding author of an amazing book, Heather McDonald. I want to say to our audience, you must, and I repeat, you must get this book, The Diversity Delusion. Read it and then share it with a friend. This book is one of the few that I've ever seen that reveals the truth and also tells how the academic ivory towers of our universities are actually threatening the individual as well as free speech. And you can also follow Heather McDonald at HMD at MI.
Watch Huckabee on Saturdays and again on Sundays at 8, 7 Central, only on TBN.